Have you ever wondered how one dynasty ends and another begins? What does it take for heaven's favor to shift from one house to another? Hello everybody, my name is Timothy and I want to welcome you to the Chinese Civilization channel. As an overseas Chinese interested in my heritage and identity, I created this channel to encapsulate my dive into Chinese civilization. Today, I will take you back to the dramatic moment when the Shang, China's first historical dynasty, fell and the Zhou rose to power. The story begins with the Battle of Muye around 1046 BCE. King Wu of Zhou faced the last Shang ruler, King Zhou. The Shang armies, once invincible, wavered. According to tradition, many soldiers refused to fight for their corrupt king, and heaven's mandate passed to the Zhou. With this victory, the Shang was swept away and a new dynasty was born. But the Western Zhou was not just a dynasty that conquered. It was a dynasty that created, shaping political structures, philosophical ideas, and ritual systems that became the bedrock of Chinese civilization for centuries to come. The Zhou explained why they ruled, not because of brute force alone, but because heaven itself had chosen them. This idea of the mandate of heaven would become central to all of Chinese history. In this video, I will give you an overview of the Western Zhou from its founding under King Wu and the Duke of Zhou, through its flourishing centuries, to its eventual decline and fall. Later videos will go even deeper, focusing on Eastern Zhou, the Spring and Autumn period, and the Warring States. But for now, we begin with the dawn of Zhou power when the people of the Wei River Valley stepped forward to claim heaven's blessing. The Zhou were not always conquerors. In fact, they began humbly as vassals under the Shang. And that is where our story truly begins, and I will explain it to you in 12 chapters, followed by an epilogue. So join me now as we travel westward to the fertile valley of the Wei River, where the Zhou first rose to prominence long before they became the rulers of all under heaven. Chapter 1. From Vassals to Conquerors. Have you ever wondered how a small, seemingly insignificant people could rise from the shadows of a great power and eventually replace it? That was exactly the story of the Zhou. The Zhou people began as a clan in the Wei River Valley in what is today Shanxi province. At first, they were far from mighty kings. They were vassals of the Shang, offering tribute and serving their overlords. Yet, even as vassals, the Zhou built their reputation. They were known for their discipline, their devotion to ritual, and their capable leaders. One of the earliest Zhou leaders remembered in legend was Zhōu Gōng, sometimes called King Tai of Zhou. He is said to have moved the Zhou clan to the fertile plains near Mount Qi, laying the foundation for their eventual greatness. His descendants, such as King Ji, further strengthened the Zhou by forging alliances and expanding their influence. By the time of King Wen of Zhou, the Zhou were no longer mere subordinates. King Wen is portrayed in tradition as a wise and benevolent ruler, guided by virtue and foresight. Though still technically under Shang rule, he gained the loyalty of many neighboring tribes and lords. His son, King Wu of Zhou, would transform this foundation into conquest. The Shang court, meanwhile, grew decadent and corrupt under its last ruler, King Zhou of Shang. The contrast between the virtuous Zhou and the despotic Shang was not lost on their contemporaries. Many began to see the Zhou as the rightful heirs to heaven's favor. Step by step, the Zhou transformed from loyal vassals into challengers. They had the moral justification, the military strength, and the vision to stake their claim. The stage was now set for the clash that would change Chinese history. And so, in the fields of Muye, the Zhou would make their bold move. In the next chapter, we'll witness the dramatic battle that ended the Shang dynasty and launched the Zhou into power. Chapter 2: The Battle of Muye. What happens when an army no longer believes in the ruler it serves? History has shown us that a king's greatest weakness is not his enemies, but the betrayal of his own people. And this is exactly what unfolded at Muye. In 1046 BCE, King Wu of Zhou gathered his forces and marched eastward against the Shang. By his side was the Duke of Zhou, his loyal uncle and advisor, who would later play a critical role in securing Zhou rule. According to the records, King Wu commanded around 45,000 troops, a disciplined force trained and united under the idea that heaven's mandate had passed to them. The Shang king, Tixing, better known in legend as King Zhou of Shang, met them with a much larger force, perhaps several hundred thousand strong. On paper, the Shang seemed unbeatable, but numbers can deceive. Many of those pressed into Shang service were not loyal warriors, but oppressed subjects, weary of the king's cruelty and extravagance. When the battle began on the plains of Muye, something remarkable happened. Instead of fighting to the death for their king, large portions of the Shang army defected or even turned their weapons against their own side. The Zhou forces surged forward and the Shang defenses collapsed. King Zhou of Shang retreated to his palace where, according to legend, he set it ablaze and perished in the flames, a dramatic symbol of the dynasty's end. The victory at Muye was not just a military triumph, it was a moral one. The Zhou presented themselves as champions of justice, restoring order to a world corrupted by Shang tyranny. For later generations, this moment stood as proof that heaven rewards virtue and punishes excesses. With the Shang defeated, King Wu had won the throne, but conquering a kingdom is only the beginning. How would the Zhou secure their new rule and transform conquest into a lasting dynasty? That's the story they turn to next. Chapter 3: Establishing the Zhou Order. How do you turn a battlefield victory into lasting rule? Many conquerors have won crowns, but few have managed to transform fragile triumph into enduring stability. For the Zhou, this was the great challenge after the fall of the Shang. King Wu of Zhou, having defeated the Shang at Muye, stood at the threshold of history. But ruling all under heaven required more than soldiers and swords. It demanded legitimacy. The Zhou leaders understood this, and they moved quickly to establish a new political and moral order. The early Zhou rulers presented themselves as moral reformers chosen by heaven. They claimed that the Shang had lost the mandate of heaven through corruption and cruelty, and that the Zhou had been entrusted to restore harmony. This powerful idea gave their reign divine justification, making their authority more than mere conquest. To administer their vast new realm, the Zhou introduced a system of enfeoffment. Relatives of the royal house, trusted generals, and allied tribal leaders were granted lands to govern in the king's name. These lords ruled their own territories but owed loyalty, military support, and tribute to the Zhou king. It was a clever balance, allowing local autonomy while binding the realm together in allegiance to the Zhou throne. But behind King Wu's success stood another figure of immense importance, his uncle, the Duke of Zhou. When King Wu died young, his heir, King Cheng, was still a child. The Duke of Zhou stepped forward as regent, guiding the dynasty through its most vulnerable years. Without his wisdom and loyalty, the Zhou might have collapsed before they had truly begun. The Zhou order then was not just about institutions. It was about leadership, vision, and the ability to persuade the people that a new moral age had begun. But legitimacy needs more than words. It needs philosophy. In the next chapter, we will see how the Duke of Zhou refined and articulated the idea of the mandate of heaven, giving Chinese civilization one of its most enduring concepts. Chapter 4: The Duke of Zhou and the Mandate of Heaven. What does it take to turn victory on the battlefield into lasting legitimacy? The Zhou's answer lay in a doctrine that would echo through the ages: the Mandate of Heaven. After the death of King Wu, his young son King Cheng ascended the throne. Too inexperienced to rule, the task of governance fell upon his uncle, the Duke of Zhou, a figure both revered and misunderstood. To some nobles, his assumption of power looked like a grab for the throne, sparking whispers of treachery. But history would vindicate him as one of the greatest architects of Zhou rule. The Duke of Zhou introduced a political and spiritual framework that redefined Chinese kingship, the Mandate of Heaven. Unlike the Shang's claim of divine lineage, the Zhou taught that heaven granted the right to rule based on virtue and moral conduct. If a dynasty fell into corruption and tyranny, heaven could withdraw its favor and bestow it upon another. This was both a justification for the Zhou conquest of Shang and a warning to future kings. Legitimacy was conditional, not eternal. To reinforce Zhou authority, the Duke of Zhou expanded the feudal order, appointing royal relatives and loyal ministers as rulers of regional states. He also laid the groundwork for ritual and moral codes that would later inspire Confucius. The Duke's famous refusal of the throne once King Cheng came of age cemented his reputation for loyalty and selflessness. From this moment, the Mandate of Heaven became a cornerstone of Chinese political thought, invoked by every dynasty that rose and fell thereafter. It was not merely a theological idea, it was a political tool ensuring both the stability and accountability of kingship. As King Cheng matured and assumed full power, the Zhou dynasty stood stronger than before, its foundation not just on conquest but on an enduring moral philosophy. The stage was now set for Zhou rule to flourish, with heaven's blessing guiding its course. But how would this mandate shape the world beyond the Zhou capital? That leads us into the next chapter. Chapter 5: The Feudal Order and Regional States. Have you ever wondered how the Zhou rulers managed to control such a vast and newly conquered territory after the fall of the Shang? The answer lies in one of the most distinctive features of their rule: the feudal order, often Fengji. After King Wu and the Duke of Zhou established their new dynasty, they faced a challenge. The Shang lands stretched across the Central Plains, home to many different tribes, clans, and former Shang loyalists. Direct rule from a single capital was impossible. To solve this, the Zhou rulers devised a system of enfeoffment. Parcels of land were granted to relatives of the royal Qi family and trusted allies, who became Zhou, vassal lords ruling semi-independent states. These vassals governed their territories, collected tribute, and commanded armies, but they owed allegiance to the Zhou king, who remained the Son of Heaven. Importantly, they also had to participate in Zhou ritual life, acknowledging the centrality of the royal house. This balance of autonomy and loyalty created a network of states tied together under the mandate of heaven. Some of the most prominent vassal states established during this time, including Yan in the northeast, Qi in the Shandong Peninsula, Lu in present-day Shandong, and Jin in Shaanxi. Many were governed by Zhou relatives, ensuring that the dynasty's bloodline spread across the realm. This arrangement not only secured loyalty but also served as a buffer system. Frontier states acted as bulwark against nomadic incursions and rebellions. The Duke of Zhou himself created the state of Lu for his own descendants, ensuring the Zhou legacy would have strongholds in multiple regions. Of course, this system also planted the seed of future challenges. As generations passed, vassal lords grew more powerful and independent, often rivaling the Zhou kings themselves. But in the early Western Zhou, this feudal order was a masterstroke of political design, allowing the dynasty to consolidate power and extend influence far beyond the Wei River Valley. And so, while the Zhou kings ruled from the heartland, the dynasty's reach spread through its network of regional states, each tied to the throne by blood, ritual, and the mandate of heaven. Chapter 6. Capitals of the West, Fenghao and Haojing. When we think of a dynasty, its capital city is often the heart that gives it life. For the Western Zhou, this heartbeat in the twin capitals of Fenghao and Haojing, both situated near present-day Xi'an in Shaanxi province. But why did the Zhou choose these sites, and how did they serve as symbols of authority and culture? The story begins with King Wu of Zhou. After his conquest of Shang, he established his court in Haojing on the east bank of the Feng River. Not far to the west, his father, King Wen, had already built his seat at Feng across the river. Over time, these two centers became collectively known as Fenghao, a unique arrangement that reflected the dynasty's deep root in the Wei River Valley. Fengjing became the primary political capital. It housed the royal palace, government offices, and ceremonial altars. Here, the king presided over rituals to heaven and earth, affirming his role as the Son of Heaven. It was also the administrative hub, where envoys from vassal states came to pay tribute and pledge allegiance. Meanwhile, Feng retained its cultural and ancestral significance. It was here that the Zhou kings honored their ancestors, reinforcing the lineage that legitimized their mandate of heaven. Together, the twin cities embodied the Zhou vision of governance, balancing ritual, politics, and tradition. Archaeological excavation at Fenghao have revealed city walls, palace foundations, bronze workshops, and ceremonial sites. These findings confirm that the Western Zhou capitals were not only centers of power but also vibrant hubs of craftsmanship, learning, and ritual practice. Bronze inscriptions from the period, often unearthed in this region, give us glimpses into the bureaucracy, military campaigns, and religious life of the Zhou court. The location of Fenghao was also strategic. Nestled in the fertile Wei River plain and protected by surrounding mountains, it provided both agricultural abundance and natural defenses. From this secure base, the Zhou kings could project their authority across the central plains and maintain order among the many vassal states. For centuries, Fenghao and Haojing stood as the political and ritual heart of the dynasty. Yet, as we will see in later chapters, the shifting balance of power and external threats would eventually force the Zhou to abandon this ancestral homeland and move eastward. Chapter 7: Rituals, Ancestors, and the Zhou Worldview. Have you ever wondered how a dynasty defines its sense of order in the world? For the Western Zhou, the answer lays in ritual, li, and ancestral worship, 宗庙祭祀, practices that not only link the living to their forebears but also frame the entire Zhou understanding of politics, society, and the cosmos. The Zhou rulers believed that their right to govern was derived from the mandate of heaven. To maintain this mandate, they had to demonstrate moral integrity and proper conduct, which they did through elaborate rituals. These ceremonies, sacrifices to heaven, earth, and ancestral spirits, affirm the king's role as the son of heaven, the mediator between the divine and the human realm. Ancestral temples, or 宗庙, were the sacred spaces where kings performed rites for their lineage. Here, bronze vessels were filled with offerings of food and wine, while prayers and invocations were recited. These rituals were not private acts of devotion, but public displays of legitimacy. Each ceremony reaffirmed that the king ruled with heaven's blessings and the ancestors' approval. The Zhou worldview was profoundly hierarchical. The king stood at the center, closest to heaven, while nobles, officials, and commoners occupied descending ranks beneath him. Each class had its own set of rituals, dress codes, and responsibilities, carefully defined to reflect their place in the cosmic order. In this way, rituals were more than religious practices, they were the framework of social and political life. What is fascinating is how this ritual order endured long after the Western Zhou fell. Later philosophers, especially Confucius, look back to the Zhou as the model of a well-ordered society. He praised their adherence to ritual and morality, arguing that these principles, more than wealth or force, were the foundations of a stable civilization. Archaeological evidence supports this ritual-centered worldview. Countless bronze vessels unearthed from Zhou tombs bear inscriptions recording sacrifices, prayers, and royal decrees. These vessels were not just works of art, they were instruments of communication with the divine and tangible expressions of the Zhou order. In essence, the Zhou saw the world as a great harmony, a balance between heaven, earth, and humanity. Rituals kept this balance intact, reminding everyone of their place within the cosmic hierarchy. It was a worldview that would shape Chinese civilization for millennia. Chapter 8: Bronze, Craft, and Cultural Flourishing. What made the Western Zhou not only a political power but also a cultural beacon of its age? The answer lies in their mastery of bronze and the flourishing arts and crafts that accompanied their rise. Bronze had already reached dazzling heights under the Shang, but the Zhou carried this legacy forward with new innovations. The bronze vessels were not merely tools or ornaments, they were deeply symbolic, used in ancient rites and political ceremonies. Every curve, inscription, and motif carried meaning, often commemorating royal decrees, victories in battle, or the continuation of the mandate of heaven. Some of the most famous examples include massive tin cauldrons, which symbolize authority and stability. Possession of such ritual bronzes was itself a statement of legitimacy, for they were believed to connect the living with the ancestors and heaven above. The Zhou kings carefully controlled who could cast and use them, reinforcing the hierarchical order of society. But Zhou craftsmanship extended far beyond bronze. Jade carvings, lacquerware, and woven silks reveal a refined aesthetic sensibility. Archaeological discoveries at Western Zhou sites show that artisans were highly skilled, blending practicality with beauty in their work. Musical instruments such as bronze bells and stone chimes also testify to the Zhou love of harmony, not only in music but in their vision of the cosmos itself. This period also saw the flourishing of early Chinese writing preserved on bronze inscriptions. Unlike the divinatory oracle bones of the Shang, Zhou inscriptions often recorded proclamations, land grants, or ancestral honors. In doing so, they created the first sustained historical records in China, embedding memory into metal. The cultural achievements of the Western Zhou went hand in hand with their political order. The control of ritual bronzes reinforced the feudal hierarchy, while artistic innovations projected an image of civilization and refinement. For the Zhou elite, displaying these cultural symbols was as essential as wielding armies. Looking back, we can see how Zhou culture set the stage for what would become the enduring traditions of Chinese civilization. Their emphasis on harmony, order, and ritual found expression not only in governance but also in their art, leaving behind a cultural legacy as enduring as their political one. Chapter 9: Daily Life in Western Zhou Society. What was life really like for the people who lived under the Western Zhou? While kings and dukes debated the mandate of heaven, most Zhou subjects lived in the villages, fields, and workshops that sustained the dynasty. At the top of society stood the aristocracy, the Zhuhou, and their families, who lived in walled cities, commanding estates granted to them through the Zhou feudal order. These nobles maintained retinues of warriors and ritual specialists, and their households were centers of both political and religious life. Their feasts included fine bronzes, jades, and elaborate musical performances, reflecting the wealth and prestige of their rank. For the majority, however, life was defined by agriculture. Farmers tilled millet and wheat fields, cultivated hemp for clothing, and raised livestock such as oxen, pigs, and sheep. Archaeological finds show that Western Zhou society relied heavily on the plough and irrigation systems, enabling surpluses that supported the ruling elite. Farming was often communal, tied to the clan structure which bound families together across generations. Craftsmen and artisans formed another vital class. Bronze casters, potters, weavers, and jade carvers produced both utilitarian goods and luxury items. Many of their products were tied to ritual: bronze vessels for offerings, silk garments for the nobility, and jade ornaments believed to hold spiritual power. These artisans were usually attached to noble households, their skills reinforcing aristocratic prestige. Family life was shaped by patriarchal hierarchy. The eldest male held authority, and ancestral worship reinforced bonds between the living and the dead. Women's role, though centered on the household, was significant. They managed food production, weaving, and ritual duties within the family. Religion permeated daily routines. Seasonal sacrifices, divination rituals, and observances to heaven and the ancestors were not limited to kings. They extended into village shrines and family altars. For the Zhou people, harmony with the unseen world was essential to survival. In sum, Western Zhou society was a tapestry woven from fields, workshops, and ritual halls. Kings may have claimed heaven's mandate, but it was the daily labor of farmers, artisans, and families that made the dynasty possible. Their rhythms of life, planting, weaving, sacrificing, and remembering created the human foundation upon which Zhou civilization stood. Chapter 10: Cracks in the Zhou Order. How does a dynasty that seems so stable begin to falter? For the Western Zhou, the very system that secured their authority, the feudal order, gradually sowed the seeds of disunity. At first, the feudal arrangement allowed the Zhou kings to extend control over vast lands. By granting territories to relatives and loyal allies, they created a web of regional states bound together by kinship, ritual, and obligation. But as generations passed, these bonds weakened. Regional lords grew increasingly independent, establishing their own power bases and paying only token allegiance to the Zhou court. Another source of weakness was succession disputes within the royal house. As in many dynasties, rival claimants sometimes contested the throne, fracturing the unity of the Zhou clan. Ambitious nobles were quick to exploit such instability, aligning themselves with different factions to enhance their own positions. Externally, threats also mounted. The Zhou heartland in the Wei River Valley was surrounded by non-Zhou peoples, often described in texts as the Rong, Ti, and other tribal groups. Though sometimes integrated into the Zhou system through marriage or alliance, they also posed recurrent military challenges. Skirmishes at the frontier forced the Zhou kings to divert resources and attention away from internal governance. Meanwhile, economic strains grew. Archaeological evidence shows that the central Zhou authority struggled to maintain control over the production of bronze, once a tightly regulated symbol of legitimacy. As more states cast their own ritual vessels and weapons, the authority of the Zhou king to define order through ritual weakened. Even the mandate of heaven, once a powerful source of legitimacy, began to lose its potency. When floods, droughts, or famine occurred, people questioned whether the Zhou kings still held heaven's favor. The narrative that had legitimized their conquest of the Shang now threatened to justify their own downfall. Thus, by the later Western Zhou, cracks appeared in the foundation. The dynasty still stood, its kings still performed rituals in Haojing, but the unity and authority of earlier generations were eroding. The stage was set for crisis and ultimately collapse. Chapter 11: The Fall of King You. Have you ever heard of a king whose downfall was sealed by laughter? The story of King You of Zhou is one of the most infamous episodes in Chinese history, a cautionary tale of folly, misplaced affection, and the perils of neglecting the mandate of heaven. King You reigned from 781 to 771 BCE, at a time when the Western Zhou was already strained by aristocratic rivalries and external threats. Instead of steadying the dynasty, he became its undoing. His obsession with a concubine named Bao Si would prove disastrous. According to legend, Bao Si rarely smiled, frustrating the king. In a shocking act of recklessness, he lit the warning beacons, signals meant to summon the nobles for war, simply to amuse her. When the lords rushed to the capital only to find no invaders, Bao Si laughed at last. This indulgence, however, carried a heavy price. The lords, humiliated and deceived, began to lose trust in their ruler. Worse still, King You deposed her queen, the daughter of the powerful Shang clan, and disinherited her son, Crown Prince Yizhōu, in favor of Bao Si's child. Enraged, the Shang nobles allied with the nomadic Qianrong, longtime enemies of Zhou. In 771 BCE, the alliance struck. Qianrong forces stormed the Zhou capital at Haojing. King You lit the beacons once more, but this time the nobles ignored the call. The kingdom's faith in its ruler was gone. Abandoned and outmatched, King You was slain near Mount Li and Bao Si captured. The Western Zhou court crumbled, marking the end of an era. The tale of King You was more than scandal. It embodies the Zhou belief that when rulers abandoned virtue, heaven withdrew its mandate. His reign became a byword for folly, remembered as a final spark that ignited the collapse of the dynasty. Chapter 12: The End of Western Zhou. The fall of King You left the Zhou world in ruins. Haojing, once the proud capital of the Western Zhou, lay devastated. The royal tombs near Mount Li were desecrated, the ancestral altars abandoned, and the aura of legitimacy that had once radiated from the House of Zhou seemed irreparably broken. For the lords who had long balanced loyalty with ambition, the message was clear. The dynasty's moral and spiritual center had collapsed. In the aftermath, the nobles of Zhou convened. They turned not to Bao Si's son, but to the deposed Crown Prince Yizhōu, who was enthroned as kingpin. This act was not so much a restoration as a salvage operation. The mandate of heaven, once unquestioned, now had to be patched together by consensus. Yet even as Kingpin ascended, the Zhou no longer commanded the same reverence. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably toward the regional lords. To survive, King Ping made a fateful decision. He abandoned the western homeland and relocated the capital to Luoyi, modern-day Luoyang. The move was practical, placing the court in a more secure position, sheltered from the nomadic incursion that has devastated Haojing, but it also symbolized the dynasty's decline. The Western Zhou, with its grandeur, its vast rituals, and its confident claim to heaven's favor, was no more. Historians have long debated the deeper meaning of this transition. Some see it as the end of a golden age when Zhou King still wielded genuine authority. Others view it as the natural evolution of the feudal system, where the dukes and marquises, once vassals, now rival their king in power. What is certain is that the Zhou dynasty, though weakened, did not end here. Instead, it staggered onward into what we now call the Eastern Zhou, an age of turmoil, fragmentation, and extraordinary intellectual flowering. Thus, the Western Zhou closed not with a clean break, but with a slow unraveling. Its kings lost their grip on power, but their legacy, the mandate of heaven, the rites and rituals, the feudal order, endured, reshaped by centuries of conflict yet still echoing through Chinese history. Epilogue: Echoes of the Western Zhou. The Western Zhou may have ended in fire and disarray, yet its legacy stretched far beyond the fall of Haojing. More than any dynasty before it, the Zhou created a framework that defined what it meant to rule in China. Its kings transformed heaven from a distant cosmic force into a moral authority wielded through the mandate of heaven. That concept would guide Chinese political thought for millennia, shaping how dynasties rose and justified their fall. The Zhou also established a feudal order, a grand experiment in balancing central kingship with regional power. Though the system eventually unraveled, it planted the seeds of China's enduring tension between unity and fragmentation, a cycle of centralization and division repeated across the centuries. Even the move eastward, marking the beginning of the Eastern Zhou, carried forward Zhou traditions of ritual, kingship, and the language of heaven's approval. Perhaps most enduring of all were the cultural foundations laid during this era. The bronze inscriptions of the Western Zhou, etched into prayers, decrees, and family histories, reveal a society deeply concerned with lineage and moral order. Its ritual vessels, burial practices, and court ceremonies became templates for later dynasties, symbols of legitimacy that outlived the rulers themselves. When we reflect on the Western Zhou, we see both achievement and fragility. A dynasty that claimed heaven's mandate with brilliance but lost it through folly. A ruling house that bound together tribes and states, yet fractured under the weight of ambition and betrayal. And a cultural system that, even after political collapse, continued to define what it meant to govern China. In the chapters to come, as we turn to the Eastern Zhou, we will witness how this legacy endured in an age of fragmentation, how the Zhou name survived even as real power slipped away, and how the intellectual ferment of the coming centuries would transform Chinese thought forever. The Western Zhou was not the end, but a beginning. The dawn of heaven's mandate, the forging of a Chinese order, and the echo that carried forward into the hearts of Chinese civilization. Our story of the Western Zhou ends right here, and in the next video, I will unveil to you the Eastern Zhou. If you have enjoyed this passage into Chinese civilization, please take a moment to give a thumbs up to this video to encourage YouTube into sharing it with other Chinese civilization enthusiasts. And subscribe to the Chinese civilization channel for more videos that take you on deep dives into Chinese history, culture, and identity. Until we meet again in the next video, this is Timothy signing out.